Who's
I'm
supposed
here.
to? Oh, you're here?
Hello.
Oh, excellent. Okay,
I was
didn't realize you'd gotten on.
No, I was lurking. I was enjoying the upbeat music. Actually, my
Uh,
kids came up to see what I was doing. That I apparently was having so much fun.
and
So,
you were dancing, yes.
well, it has happened occasionally.
Well, Nikki, thanks for joining us. And we have a great group today, and we just had a great talk from Marla Perez Davis, and looking forward to hearing from you. And everybody has your biography. Did you have any presentation charts, or?
So I am sharing. I think
Yep.
I always worry about this because I emailed you late last night. I was like, oh, I'll just share my screen, and then
Yeah.
there's always that worry that Teams is going to let you down. But anyway, I did pull some stuff together. As you had correctly noted, I would be doing it at the last minute.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's okay. I understand.
So okay. It's really nice to be here. I'm glad to be able to take part in one of these. It's a while since I did one. Normally they're in person, and I'm part of a panel. So
Yep.
I'll try and fill the hour with something exciting for you guys. Anyway.
Okay, and I'll turn it over to you, and you have, I can see your slides, and then we also have people will be asking. I'll be getting questions for you, so when we get to the Q&A session.
All right, sounds
Thank
great. Okay, so when I got my title, I started thinking about kind of what effective project management and leadership of NASA missions really meant to me, and kind of what it really brought to mind was the difference in what I do now compared to what I did 2 years ago. So I am the director of the heliophysics division now, and before that I was the project scientist. Actually, I should just go to the next slide so you can see all about me. I was the project scientist for Parker Solar Probe, and so I've done a couple of these workshops for Walt, really just talking about being a project scientist and leading a mission team. But now it's a very different situation where I'm actually leading an entire division, and to a certain extent a whole community. And so I started to sort of pick up on some of the differences, some of the challenges, and some of the the really big changes that I've had to go through. And so you've seen my bio, so that's just a little bit about me. But I do have 2 young kids, and so I know that a lot of you are probably experiencing what I'm experiencing right now, which is them learning from home and doing virtual school while I am doing full-time work. And so, the challenges of that. And thank God, so mine are 5th and 8th grade, and they're both really tech savvy. So I'm not doing a lot of, I've been witnessing a lot of colleagues that are kind of trying to get their kids dressed and feeding them breakfast, and they're trying to have a meeting, and everything crashes, and they're having to deal with that. Most of the time I'm fine, except for 1 week ago when our internet with the Wi-Fi in the house crashed, and then you would have thought that life as we know it had currently ended, and everything went to pieces. But so, there's one challenge that I think a lot of us are probably facing right now, is dealing with kids at home. And so I do want to talk a little bit about the challenges of leading through COVID. I did look at the pre-questionnaires that you guys had done before starting the workshop, and I saw a lot of you really focusing on how to lead or how to manage through COVID. So I will just start off because, hey, I like to look at movies of the sun, just really to tell you a little bit about heliophysics in general. So the scope of heliophysics is vast. It goes all the way from the sun's interior to all the way down to the Earth's upper atmosphere here on our planet, but also throughout interplanetary space to the final boundary kind of where the sun's atmosphere dies away and interstellar space starts. And so we study, I sometimes like to say, the spaces in between. But what we do in heliophysics is we solve fundamental physics, we solve the mysteries, we explore and we examine and we look at all the physical processes in the space environment, from the sun all the way to that very tenuous boundary with interstellar space. But we're really building knowledge to help us better forecast space weather throughout our heliosphere, to develop the knowledge and the capability to predict, and really understand the impact of extreme conditions. And then it helps us, of course, understand our nature of our home in space. It advances our understanding of the connections that link the sun, the Earth, and all of those planetary space environments all the way to the very edge of our system. And so, that's heliophysics. In the heliophysics division, if I can get this to go to the next, there we go, the next slide. So we use sort of innovative, cutting-edge missions that are put in strategic locations throughout all of our solar system. And it includes PI-led, team-focused research. It includes modeling, data analysis. We have a big, vibrant suborbital program with balloons, sounding rockets, CubeSats, and of course, experimental and lab facilities, and our instrument development program. We have a very vibrant and quickly growing external community, and I'll get into that a little bit with one of the challenges. And we, of course, have both directed and competed approaches. So we have several directed missions. Right now, we just have one that we've just directed to Goddard Space Flight Center for the Geospace Dynamics constellation, and that just went through their KDPA. Yes, it's still September, so earlier this month. One of the things that we have to respond to is our decadal survey. And so every 10 years or so, the community get together under the National Academy and give us kind of a roadmap of what we're going to do moving forward. We also have our own science plan in the Science Mission Directorate. We have the National Space Weather Strategy and Action Plan, and we have some of our own strategic working groups. So they're just some of the things that we do in the heliophysics division. This is, I like to call this my baby picture. So this is all of the missions that we currently have in orbit or in development. So we have 20 operating missions, 27 spacecraft, and 6 missions in formulation. So for those of you who kind of keeping count, that's a lot of missions to have in formulation. We actually have, on here right now, you can see 5 actual missions plus Hermes, which is a payload that's going on the Gateway. We also, GDC is not yet on this chart. So I have 6, 7, or 8 missions, depending quite how you count things, that are currently in phase A or B. And then I have nothing in C, D. I have a few in E and a lot in F. And so that's quite a challenge because we've got this big bow wave of work. And so one of the things that we really struggle with is workload and workforce balance, and we've done a lot to try and address that in the last 2 years. So I really wanted to focus on some of the differences in being a project scientist to going to a division director, and kind of some of the lessons that I've learned in the first couple of years. So I've been in my position just 2 years, and so I started challenging myself a little bit to prepare for this, about thinking what's really different about managing a division rather than a mission. And it's just being responsible for so much more. It's the sheer amount of content that I suddenly have. The first thing is learning what you don't know. So I came in having just launched Parker Solar Probe, feeling pretty good about myself, I have to say. It was a wonderful launch. It was a wonderful mission. It was a great team. Some of you may have even worked on it. And it was just a really great experience. And of course, I know missions like down to the last nut and bolt on the spacecraft. And I love the working with the engineers. I love all that teamwork. They're being really involved. I've never met a requirement I didn't like. I love me a risk table. I'm really happy with my risk matrices. And so I knew missions inside and out. But I didn't know the rest of the portfolio. And so very quickly, having to get up to speed and being totally comfortable saying, I don't know what you're talking about, or can you tell me more about that, was something that I quickly had to deal with. The other thing was really managing and empowering people. They kind of go hand in hand. But with a science team, I came into Parker Solar Probe with a science team kind of fractured, and a lot of factions and a lot of infighting. And the first thing I had to do was kind of deal with that and get the team to all move in the same direction. And so that was a strategic skill that I brought into play in the division. Before I joined, there had been, I think it was maybe six division directors over the course of 7 years. And so it was a pretty tough environment to come into. The community was nervous and fearful about the future. And there were obviously factions that had formed in the division. And so coming in and really dealing with managing the group and empowering people to go forward and do good was something that I did really quickly. It was just dealing with kind of getting a cohesive workforce with us all pulling in the same direction. One other big challenge was listening to multiple voices, and I have that in quotes because I don't just mean, I don't mean the voices in my head, but I mean the idea that there are so many different people that now care about what you're doing. And so you'll find this a lot in the projects and missions that you do, where there's all these different stakeholders and they all have an opinion, and at the very least you have to listen to them all. At some point you have to make a decision and move on, but they're listening to all of the different people. And of course, when you go to a division, the number of voices, number of stakeholders really increases. Budget and strategy, that wasn't something I was particularly used to. I was usually putting into practice somebody else's strategy and spending somebody else's budget. And so having to come in and really take control and take ownership of a huge budget and getting everyone pulling with the same strategy. So one of the things that I did was I continually asked for feedback from the day I got in. First of all, I had a pretty strict firewall because I came from the applied physics lab to the heliophysics division, where half of the portfolio roughly belongs to APL. And so having to learn to work within that firewall was kind of interesting, I'll say. But I encouraged everybody, if you see me close to my firewall, if you see me doing something, if you see something you don't like, come and tell me and we'll talk about it and move on. And so it led to pretty honest feedback, both good and negative. I learned to adapt to the feedback, and I recently did a 360 review. That was something I actually just got the results last week from that, and so I've got a couple of thoughts sprinkled through the rest of the presentation that I picked up from feedback from the 360 review. So if you get a chance to do one, or whatever review that they do at your center, really take advantage of that. It's a chance to get a lot of feedback and work out where your strengths and weaknesses are. And then the other thing I do is a lot of mentoring. I have mentors for myself, but I do a lot of mentoring of other people, and I really encourage you to do that, particularly as you move higher in the organization. You learn an awful lot from mentoring other people. You often find you have shared challenges, and together you can face them. Sometimes it's just nice to know that you're not facing things alone, and other people are having issues too. So I really encourage you to both seek really good mentors for yourselves, but also to mentor as many people as you have bandwidth for. It's rewarding and very, very insightful. But some of the challenges that I face every day, or that leaders will face every day, of course, is resource planning. We have budget cycles. We get our money. We ask for our money 2 years in advance. We get to know what we're going to get maybe just a year beforehand, and then you really know what you're going to get just a few months before you have to start spending. So figuring out how to do budget cycles was a big challenge for me. Workforce planning continues to be a big struggle. Workload, overload. My division is really stretched and really, we are struggling is too strong of a word, but we're finding it very, very challenging to deal with the amount of work. You noted when I showed you the fleet chart that I have, depending how you count them, anywhere from 6 to 8 missions, either in phase A or B. We actually have 6 full missions in phase B, GDC in phase A, and then another mission that's in an extended phase B right now. And that's a lot of missions to deal with in those early phases, plus of course all the other work that needs to go on. But there's a big overload. Planning for people who are retiring, making sure, this is something that's probably more unique to me, but making sure that you have the right expertise. So for me, it's making sure I have the right science experts in the division, but making sure that you just have the right expertise. Figuring out how to embrace early career, bringing early career people into a division. It's so easy to pick the person who's really, really experienced, that's done it a bazillion times, that can just plug and play and jump in and do the job. But then you do miss out on these whole fresh perspectives, fresh new ideas, fresh ways of doing things, and also bringing diversity into the workforce. I have always had the pleasure of working on pretty diverse teams throughout my career. And I really feel that just the strength is in the diversity, different personalities, different backgrounds, different ways of doing things. And this is totally not just a race and gender, but just a real diversity of thought, perspective, and making sure that we're always looking for that, because that makes our workforce stronger. Inter and intrapersonal effectiveness, how are people working together? Are they making an effective team? And then the last one is how to include innovation, and planning to include innovation is something that we found very challenging, particularly as we don't often have a lot of time. Sometimes, we get our appropriation in February if we're lucky, and then we have to have it all spent in a few months. And bringing innovation into that is hard unless you've really planned for it. So I wanted to touch a little bit on defining strategy. Since we'd had a pretty varied past in the division before I joined, I really wanted to get everyone to stand back and do kind of a holistic and comprehensive look at our whole portfolio. I did this by organizing some strategic working groups. The one thing that is hard to do is write a strategy document with like 45 people in the room. That's never going to work. And so I broke it up into different themes and let the teams kind of form around them. I assigned a lead, but then anyone in the division could join any one of the groups. The only thing they had to do was join at least one, so they had to be present in at least one of them. We did a division retreat. We did it during COVID, so I'll tell you a little bit more about how we managed to do that. But again, bringing the division together and making sure every voice was heard was something that I really wanted to make sure we did moving forward, so that it wasn't just my vision, but it was their vision. The other thing was really positioning the field for success in the next decade and beyond. So we had our last decadal in 2013, which means we have another one coming up and another one that's due. And really figuring out what is the next big missions, what are the next big goals for heliophysics. With Solar Probe, we'd always talked about coronal heating and going in close to the sun and explaining why the corona is hotter than the surface of the sun. And that's amazing fundamental science that is driven by those questions. But what are the next big questions? And then openly communicating and engaging as much as possible with the scientific community. Or with any community. So you can take the scientific out and think of it in terms of your own communities, but you cannot communicate enough. I have found that even though I think I am always doing things, there's always a little more that I could be doing. So really making sure that we have this open communication. I'm not going to belabor this one. This was really just to show the example that we broke the overall heliophysics strategy into a group of sort of 8 topics. Some of them are producing more like planning tools, others are producing strategy documents and implementation plans. But right as I joined, on the end of the previous presentation, I heard somebody asking about if you could, I think it was plan for change. And it's actually funny because I had that on a bullet on my final chart about needing to plan for change, even though you don't know what the change is, but needing to have plans in place so you can be adaptable to suddenly jump to be able to embrace the change that you're having to do. And a good example is on here was actually on both archiving and technology, which we'd started doing these strategic working groups. We were looking at our plans, we were looking at how we were going to implement them. And in my appropriation language, earlier this year, my appropriation language said, we direct, essentially paraphrasing, but we direct the heliophysics division to create a standalone technology program. And we had already been working on this strategy, and so it was not painless, but it was fairly easy for us to be able to say, okay, here is our strategy, here's how we're going to implement it, and this is what we're going to do to our current program to actually do what we've been asked to do. And so we were able to start the beginning of a technology program with a plan to grow in the next 2 years in response to that, and we're already done because fortunately we were actually planning for how we wanted to use technology. Similar thing for archiving, when we got a request for doing a strategic plan for how we would archive all NASA data and how we would feed into that, and we were actually already way ahead of people. So having that ability to have a framework in place, starting to think about the things so that when change comes to some of your big areas in whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's a mission, whether it's a project, whether it's a huge team, but things that these are really important hot topics. Getting ahead and doing that strategic planning is really important. It also, again, let everybody in the division come in and get sort of a piece and own something in our strategy moving forward. And this is just a little milestone map that I threw in. The point I was going to make here is that I have my working groups professionally facilitated, and I cannot recommend that enough. If you really want to do this, it is worth getting somebody this is what they do for a living to come in and organize your teams, because, I have predominantly scientists, but a lot of engineers. And you bring 4 scientists into a room, you'll get 4 different opinions. They'll argue for 2 hours, they'll leave, and they may have different opinions to the ones they came in with, but they're probably still different from the other 3. And so having somebody who could really guide and lead the strategic discussion was invaluable. And so you can just kind of see where the various different various different strategy working groups are kind of in their development. And that was just a note about definitely get it professionally done if you're really interested. The other thing that we really wanted to do was have a retreat so that we could have some of the hard conversations, that we could have just talk about the things that are difficult to talk about in an everyday setting. One, because you don't have time, we're all overworked and we don't have time to really sit and strategize and sit and do all these kind of things, but also things that people don't want to tell you. And I took very seriously the FEVS survey, and I'm sure you've all received your link to do your FEVS survey, but I will just say on behalf of your management, please do it. We take it really, really seriously. I took the heliophysics one very seriously and actually made some significant changes to the way the organization was run because of the feedback that we got in the FEVS. But what I did with the retreat, we were going to have it in person. We delayed it twice, and then it becomes very clear that COVID is not going away, and so we decided to be brave and take it to a virtual setting. Again, I had a professional team that came in. I had some Booz Allen consultants that came in with tools and with techniques, and they worked very hard on sort of pre-retreat planning, making sure everyone in the division learned how to use the various online tools that we were going to be using. They sent out a questionnaire that was totally anonymized to get information coming in, but all of the staff participated in activities and discussions. It was a very interactive virtual platform. You can see it there. It's actually called Mural. They split. We used WebEx, and for once WebEx worked really, really well. And we were all in one main group, and then they would sort of hit a button, and we would all be dispersed into the little breakout groups, and then you could pull everybody back in together. And so even though we were virtual, we were still able to have the discussions that we needed. The only thing, of course, that was missing is the happy hours at the end of the day. So we did those virtually also via Teams. You just had to bring your own drink, but we did at least try as much as possible to get that feeling of community. And that's something that I think we're all struggling with whilst working in COVID. And so, this is more information, but this is really about how we did find that the pre-workshop survey, we really found that there were 4 main themes. Those 4 themes we took into the retreat, which was structured innovation. And that sounds like a weird dichotomy, but just really getting a structure in place that allows for innovation. And so, we always say progress really just, it goes at the speed of innovation. And so we wanted to make sure we'd set up a forum or some kind of path to allow innovative thoughts that would allow you to challenge the ways that we've always done things and wild ideas, or as I say, crazy ideas. My door is always open for crazy ideas, and the only condition I have with it is you have to follow it through. So don't come in and give me a crazy idea and then expect me to do it, kind of thing. But come in with a crazy idea, and the first thing I will do is say, I'm not sure about that, but let's go map it out and see what it looks like. And some of the things we go forward with, some of, obviously when you start thinking about the path forward, don't work so well. but really allowing to have an organization where innovation can easily be absorbed. The other thing was really looking at kind of a brand. This is a little bit of marketing. You can tell I had professional facilitator, but really defining a collective culture and getting buy-in from all of the division, and then going out and sharing it externally. It is very much, you want everyone to sort of talk with the same voice, to be embracing the same kind of strategy moving forward, and really to have consistent messaging going out to the larger community. And part of that comes in also with a strategic communication, getting a really good rapport with all of our collaborators, whether it's all the way up to the hill, whether it's down to all of the projects and all of the different elements in the project, but really requiring very intentional communications and make sure that it's embraced and really that are bought into by the entire division. And then the last one, chaos, lowering performance, which, lack of communication structure, lack of human resources, all that kind of stuff, and just how much it really lowers performance. To try and deal with that one in particular, we did one activity, we called it the challenge wheel exercise, and we challenged everybody to go to each one of these different sections and only write down what challenged their ability to do the job at that particular stage. So no kudos, nothing good, nothing. It was all about what's the challenges that we face. So that we would actually end up with actionable tools, like how do I make my team's life easier? And so we're now in the process of exploring recommendations for implementation. But Heliophysics, though, as a division, has gained a very broad understanding, I think, of our division's strengths and challenges, as well as the vision kind of moving forward. And we really came together and discussed both operational and cultural barriers to us being able to move forward. Everyone from the division walked out, that's in quotes because obviously it was in a virtual setting, but we had a real solid first draft of an overarching strategy moving forward. We certainly worked through some of the predetermined challenges and topics. COVID-19, of course, was a huge impact. What we were doing about cluttered calendars, real desire for better diversity and inclusion in the division. And we spent a significant amount of time identifying challenges that created those barriers. So we do think we've come out of this retreat with a solid foundation to work to sort of create a happy, healthy, strong, and cohesive division moving forward. I'll just note there you can see almost all of the team at the Solar Orbiter launch. One of the things Peg, my deputy, and I decided to do was allow everyone in the division to go to the launch. They all had roles, they all had work, they weren't just sitting on the beach all the time, clearly. But we actually gave everyone in the division an opportunity to go to the launch. For those of you who know anything about Solar Orbiter, it's actually an ESA NASA missions. We had a lot of foreign nationals coming over, so a lot of people needed to be there to escort them. So these guys were pretty busy the whole time they were there, but it really fostered a feeling of community and that everyone was valued and everybody was sort of treated the same by taking everyone in the division. That also, I'll just note, the launch was in mid-February, so it was right before COVID hit. And so, hindsight is 2020, but man, that was a fantastic decision to take them as a group to that launch and experience it all together. And then I'll just kind of finish with hitting some of the things that managing in the time of COVID. So you can see one of the happy hours that we had where it was Silly Hat Day. But one of the things that we found is maintaining touch points with staff is really challenging, as you all know. That idea of just walking down the hallway, sticking your head in and saying, hey, how's it going? Or, hey, I've got a real quick question. Instead of being able to do that, now everything is a 30-minute Teams meeting, and it is draining on everybody's time. However, I've had a lot of people who I know have been struggling with feelings of isolation, feelings of just overload, desperation, family illness, family death, very big, challenging things that we're all going through. I mean, I mentioned at the beginning the having the kids at home doing virtual learning whilst trying to do my job. There are other people who basically haven't really had anyone to talk to for months because they're on their own and isolated. And so we set up a one-on-one with every single person in the division at least once every 2 weeks. They're usually for 15 to 20 minutes. Some people need longer, and I have 1 or 2 people that I put at the end of the day because they actually require about an hour and a half because they just really need to talk. And there's been a lot of tears and a lot of shared experiences, and it's definitely challenging and it's emotionally draining, but I do think it has been really worth it to kind of try and keep that foster the feeling of family that we'd actually managed to achieve beforehand. Onboarding and integrating new staff obviously is really challenging. We did very early, we put together a kind of a package that was everything you need to know about heliophysics that we could give to our new people. We've onboarded a lot of new people during COVID. And then also assigning them like a buddy and a couple of mentors. So, a couple of people who are looking after them from a business job related point of view, and then 1 or 2 who are just looking after them from the, hey, how's it going? Maybe we could grab a cup of coffee this morning, go to Teams and just chit chat about how things are going on to make sure that, or at least try to make sure that we're not having people really struggle. I'm sure you're all finding teleworking has led to way more meetings. We've lost any of that sort of just ease of being able to communicate. Everything is now a meeting. Balancing workloads and the assessments is something Peg and I are continually doing. We're continually looking at who's doing what and if we need to rebalance or move around some responsibilities to try and help people. And then Quiet Fridays. This was something SMD started every other Friday as a supposed to be meeting-free Friday, which for me, I think means everybody knows I don't have a meeting on Friday, so they put one on that Friday. So my meeting-free Fridays are rarely meeting-free, and I'm sure that you're all finding that too. But the importance of trying to take time for yourself and time to just decompress and do some self-care. The last major thought I wanted to touch on was diversity and inclusion efforts. We are engaging as a division very strongly in trying to increase diversity in research. We've started doing things like dual anonymous, where you don't know who's written the proposals. So we get these research proposals come in and they're anonymized, and there's we work really hard to make sure that you can't identify the scientists or the institutions that they come from, to actually remove any sort of maybe unconscious bias, maybe preconceived notions, but to allow maybe schools that are not in the the typical 5 or 8 that we think of as our best institutions, to give them the same chance to win, because you're looking at it purely from the science. And then also to allow people to say, hey, I've got a really high risk, but we think it's a really high reward proposal, to ensure that we're not throwing away proposals just because we think they're too risky, so that you can identify high risk, high reward, and then every quarter, I think it is, we sweep up all of those that weren't funded and take a second look at them. We engage with our advisory committees a lot, and we've got a lot of recommendations that we're going through right now for how to increase diversity. SMD has established an action team that's advising Thomas Sabuk and the AA on how we will address any issues of racism. And we've re-established our diversity and inclusion working group. Really sort of, that says re-established, but it's really reinvigorated it to make sure we're driving change in this area. We recently did interviews in heliophysics. We're hiring new staff, and we went to a lot of trouble to make sure we went back into the CERT a number of times to ensure that we had a really diverse candidate pool from which we will select our new staff members, not just picking the names that you know or the names that you've heard of, but really going in and ensuring that we have an incredibly diverse candidate pool that we can start to evaluate. And then I also took extra steps to make sure that my review panel was really diverse, and that was both from gender, race, background. Somebody who didn't really know anything about heliophysics that was just there listening for, what is this person's management style like? How well do they communicate, etc. Just looking at it from totally different points of view to make sure that we are hiring without any unintentional bias, without any unconscious bias, without anything at all. Just really looking for getting the best candidates in to do the jobs. And so I will finish with some of the key takeaways that kind of I came to while I was thinking about this and putting this together. Some of this again came from results from my 360 that I recently did. But number one for me is focus on people. Right now, more than any time, it is hard to feel like we're a community. It's hard to feel like we're a team. We've somewhat lost our identity a little bit, and we're all sitting here staring at computer screens all the time. And so really focusing on your people and making sure that they feel valued and heard is a really now more than ever. I added this one, limiting the multitasking. This is a kind of do what I say, not what I do, but always be present. And this was something I found. I was actually reviewing the results of my 360 whilst in a meeting, and I read that one of the ways that I could be a better manager was to not check my mobile devices during meetings. And there I was reading the feedback during a meeting. And so I'm trying to make a very conscious effort to not multitask, to be present. Other people are spending their time in a Teams room also. And so if I'm going to be there, then I need to actually be really present in that meeting. Sometimes, if your boss sends you the emergency text, you kind of have to say, I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to have to take this one. But not just to think, I can just do those 3 emails while this person's talking, because it's really not courteous and people do notice that you're not there. Ensuring every voice is heard. This is another one that's really, so kind of this is in the focusing on people, but making sure that you don't just listen to 1 or 2 people in your organization, but you are listening to everybody, so that again they all feel valued and they don't just think, there's no point me talking because she only ever listens to person X. Making sure that you listen to everybody. Building consensus, but not letting it infringe upon decisiveness. So this is kind of in the you can't please everybody, which was my sort of final one, but it's really important to build consensus, but you can't stop everything while you wait for consensus to be built. At some point, you just have to say, this is my decision, I'm making it, and we're moving on, but I appreciate everyone's input. And the more consensus you can get, the better, but you can't let it impede progress. So planning for change, I already talked about, but putting yourself in a situation where you can adapt to change, where you can just suddenly, something new's come in, how do you respond to it? We had an opportunity to put an instrument package on the gateway, the first module of the gateway, but we had less than 2 years to deliver that from when they said, yes, we'd like you to put a package on. We had less than 2 years to when we have to deliver a final instruments for integration. And so how the heck do you do that? We had to come up with a whole new process to be able to so that we didn't lose that opportunity and we could actually put our space weather package on there. Don't be afraid of change, but always ensure that you articulate any direction that you're moving in clearly and stick to it. Don't change once and then change again. Make a decision and articulate it, and then stick to it. Modeling the behavior you want to see in your team, taking time for yourself. So I realized I'm very bad at this myself. I work all the time. I'm sure you guys do the same thing, and you send emails late at night. And if you send an email and you're the boss and you send an email late at night, somebody feels that they need to respond to it. And so when I say to people, have a good weekend, unplug on Friday, I'll see you on Monday, I've actually now I'm consciously not sending emails over the weekend unless somebody sends one to me and it's a really urgent thing and they need a response straight away, and then I'll reply to it. But other than that, I save everything. I do the you can do the delayed send, and so everything gets sent at 7 o'clock on Monday morning, and that's when most of the the communication comes. And I really try to not, the same with meeting free Friday. I don't put meetings on other people's calendars. I can't say they do that for me all the time, but Making sure that you're taking time for yourself, dealing with this, I think more than ever in this environment. So I live in Colombia, I work in DC at headquarters. I never thought there would be a moment in my life when I would say, gee, I really miss my commute. But I do, because I was used to, you leave the office, you pack up your laptop, you put it in your bag, you walk down to the parking lot and you get in your car and you've got, well, for me, anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half on the way home on the Beltway, etc. to just, it was just my time in the car. And sometimes I do telecons, sometimes I call friends, whatever it was my time in the car. And now my commute is one staircase. And so I leave here, my computer is running all the time. I walk downstairs and I'm instantly hit with the, hey mom, can I have this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And it's overwhelming. And I'm trying to find ways to add some of that decompression time, because it's also not fair to my family that I am constantly, in this mode. One thing I learned as well is you cannot communicate too often. So I found that, this summer I've gone to, at least virtually, but I've gone to as many meetings, I've given tons of town halls about heliophysics and what our strategies are moving forward and what our goals are. And yet I still get more requests. Tell us more about what you're doing. Tell us more about this. And so we started putting out community newsletters every 2 weeks, and everybody really likes those. And now they'd like more. They'd like them every week. So I've learned that you cannot communicate too often. And then my last one, which I've already touched on, is you really cannot please everyone. There is going to, it's a fantastic goal to have, that you want to please everybody, but you have to be realistic and realize that to achieve something, that's just not possible. And so kind of forgive yourself if you find that you just can't please anyone. And that was all I had to say.
Wow, that was a lot of information there, Nikki. And I think you knocked it out on the park on that one. Can you send me those charts so I can get them out to everybody?
I absolutely will. Yes. Okay. Yes, they were too big to email them to you right now, so I'll FT them to you, but I'll get it to you. Yeah, no problem.
That sounds great. I appreciate that. And back to your last point, you can't please everyone. I'm not going to can't be able to please everyone because I have such a long list of questions for you. We won't have time. But let me start at the top here, because there's been a lot of good chat going on. How do you balance broad portfolio knowledge with individual project / technical depth? And that came from Dan Wetzel.
That's a really great question. And I tried to touch on that a little bit. I came in with really narrow focused knowledge when I came into and so the first thing I had to do was just say, I don't know everything, and it's okay that I don't know everything, because I've got a great team. And you know what? Together, we know everything. And so really learning, which was a new thing for me, to learn to really rely on other people where I really didn't know what they were talking about. Most of the time, I'd managed to have that enough knowledge to be dangerous kind of thing previously. But learning to really rely on your team, you're a cohesive team and you're together because you all have different skills and they kind of mesh that. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not trying to learn about everything as I go. And, I pick something kind of every month almost, where it's like, okay, this month I'm going to figure out this damn budget. Like, what the hell is this? Why do I have 3 budgets in play at any one time? But really learning to just, it's possible to have a really deep knowledge in one area yourself and rely on the rest of your team to bring you that really broad knowledge. And they'll never let you down if they know you trust them.
Yep. Very good. Our next question comes from Karina Koka. How do you handle difficult discussions and decisions where folks might not like the news they are receiving?
I take a big breath and I just suck it up and give them the news. And it's not easy. And that's why I said that my last point, you have to forgive yourself. You cannot please everybody. And as long as you've made the decision and you've made it for the right reasons and you can articulate those reasons. I mean, I will always have the courtesy of telling somebody why I'm doing something, even though they may have told me to turn left and I'm like, I'm going to turn right. But here are the 3 reasons that I picked this decision. And I've understood that you told me the risks of turning right and you think left is better, but we're going to go with right and we'll reassess it at a certain time. And so that you kind of at least acknowledge that they've made their point, even though they don't, and acknowledge that that they don't like what you're doing.
Yep. Very good. Our next question comes from Joe Hickman. How did your perspective? How did your perspective change on the political climate at headquarters after climbing from project scientist to division director?
I actually really enjoy it. My perspective changed a lot because you're in the middle of it, and so you understand it a lot better. Now, I was actually really lucky, so I'm just going to brag a little bit about my wonderful Parker Solar Probe team, just a
Absolutely.
little bit. Because we had what I called a real badgeless team, and many of you may have worked on Solar Probe at one of the centers, but there was no them and us. And I was at APL, and often there is the APL NASA tension or APL Goddard tension or Goddard headquarters tension, whatever you want to pick. There's tension everywhere. And we just didn't have it. We started off to be really transparent, really open, and everybody had everybody else's back. And so when it came to the very end, we were getting ready to ship the spacecraft, and we had thermal sensors that were failing. And we're going pretty close to the sun, so it's kind of important to have a thermal sensor. And they were failing. And if we hadn't shipped, we wouldn't have launched on time. And Thomas Sabukin said, bet on the team, because we've strengthened these relationships. And so when I came to headquarters, I felt like people had my back, and it's a very, very collegial, SMD is a fantastic directorate. Like, all the divisions, we're there to strengthen one another. We all talk about other one's sides. We all talk about everybody's strengths, everyone's successes. And we're all there for each other, particularly the division directors, to help one another. I had the late Mike Freilich and Paul Hertz have just been outstanding for giving me all the knowledge of, in SND this means that, and just giving me that kind of knowledge. So I really like it, and I didn't have maybe as big a perspective change as somebody else who hadn't been quite so involved in a mission that had so much agency. But I try and explain to other people that would have that big change, exactly what SMD is like, and that really when we are all pulling together and we're trying to get as much out to the community, et cetera, et cetera. So it changed a little bit, but not a huge amount.
Okay. Speaking of the Parker Solar Probe, Tom Moss has the question, what was the biggest lesson learned from Parker Solar Probe?
Trust your team, always bet on the team. That without hands down, watching people that said, I was fortunate enough to spend my last 6 weeks actually at my job, but also before the launch in Florida with the team. And I watched that team every single day. And it didn't matter what organization, ULA, Astrotech, Goddard, Kennedy, it didn't matter, APL. What do you need? What do you need? What do you need? We need to do this test. We're supposed to be doing blanketing then. Well, that's okay. Can we do blanketing at 1 o'clock in the morning? Yes, that would work. Thank you. Just the strength of trusting your team and knowing that they will be there for you, and that's my biggest plus from there.
Very good. Our next question comes from Vanessa Sotomayor. From a budget perspective, can you share how COVID impacts to current missions are affecting the wedge for future missions, if at all?
So right now for Helio, not at all. Fingers crossed, knocking on something related to wood. So because nothing right now, because all the missions are in phase B, which means, there's all those things you can do right now, but the longer it goes on, we will probably end up being the one that's most impacted, because that's when you start stretching, and that's when, but for now, we don't think that we will have any real impacts until about the 2024 budget. Right now, we can cope with UFE and mission reserves, and it really, as you all know, you're all in the same boat. If you don't know when it ends, you really don't know what the impact is. But so far for Helio, we are good, and we're able to support even the research community with some augmentation to get them through some of their inefficiencies. Right. But ask me back next year and see if I'm still as perky about it then.
Yeah, exactly. Stay tuned. Our next question comes from Keith Rosette. How are you making the transition from directing a team with a specific product to leading a group of other leaders?
I think I'm adapting well. You'd probably have to ask my team. I did score well on that on the leadership in the 360, so I'm actually really enjoying it. Again, Every team you lead is really a collection of leaders. It's just a different kind of level of the leading. I mean, when you lead a mission team, you're leading all your subsystem leads. So when you're a subsystem lead, you're leading all your engineers that are building your subsystem. So you're kind of always in a good team. It's really always a collection of leaders. The higher up you go, the more interesting the personalities become with the different leaders, and particularly when you go out to the community and you've got a interesting spectrum of social ego distribution or something like that. So that can be challenging, but I enjoy it.
Yep. Excellent. Well, we're out of time, but I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule and take on another meeting. I know everybody enjoyed it, and there's been a lot of dialogue and questions, but I do really appreciate all the insights you provided. So thank you, Nikki.
Oh, you're welcome. I just want to say quick hello to Kristen Brown, who's on, because I met her in a new mummies group, and I know that she's struggling with kids at home the same age as mine right now. So
that's right. Yeah, a lot of people are. Good luck to you. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.